Welcome everyone, hello, and welcome to today's HR Tech in the Age of Skills and Talent Shortage, What's Next? Webinar with Thomas Otter, Acadian Ventures General Partner, and Filip Misovski, Simos Cloud's CEO. My name is Raviola and I'm a Content Marketing Specialist here at Simos Cloud, and I'll be guiding you through today's session. First, I take the chance to introduce ourselves. As some of you might already know, we're an independent software company focusing on the design, development, implementation, and support of sophisticated enterprise HR technology. We have experience in building, implementing, and delivering employee experience cloud solutions. For a decade now, we have been delivering integrations on public cloud platforms with technical and business support from our partner teams at SAP, Microsoft, and Oracle. Our client base includes global Fortune 500 enterprises. SAP accepted us into a Cloud Development Accelerator in 2013. In 2018, we won the SAP Pinnacle Award. In 2020, we became an SAP endorsed partner and joined SAP's Premier Partnership Program. We're also a founding member of the Partner Advisory Council for Innovation Group and work alongside other top SIs and ISVs on building competitive cloud and AI offerings. Before we kick off with today's agenda, here is what you need to know. You can use the Q&A function to pose questions and feel free to do so during the course of the entire webinar. You can also use the chat function to introduce yourselves and tell us what you want to learn in today's webinar. Thomas and Filip will engage in a very lively discussion on HR tech in the age of skills and talent shortage, and after that, there'll be some time to answer questions from the audience. For anyone who wasn't able to attend or has to leave early, don't worry, we got you. We'll send out the webinar recording shortly after the webinar ends. Okay, and today, this is what our agenda will be today. We'll talk about what companies can do to manage talent when the size of the labor force is shrinking and there are skills and talent shortages in the job market. And what opportunities are there to bring remedy fast while working on long-term solutions for people's sustainability. We'll address how to expand the talent pool to tackle talent shortage. What are the challenges of hiring foreign talent? How HR tech helps with managing skill shortages in a workforce? How is artificial intelligence stepping in to perform certain roles and skill sets? And what are the challenging or changing trends of retirees returning to the workforce? Even though our speakers today don't need a special introduction, I'll introduce them nevertheless. Here we have Thomas Otter, welcome. Dr. Thomas Otter is a general partner at Acadian Ventures, a venture capital firm helping founders around the world build enduring companies that make work better, fairer, more meaningful, and ultimately more productive. Dr. Thomas Otter has completed PhD at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, cum laude, and has been earning significant academic and business accomplishments since. His field of research includes enterprise software, GDPR, accessibility, venture and managerial finance, and IT law. In 2018, he started Otter Advisory with the aim of supporting the leading HR tech companies and enterprise software customers to be more successful. Aren't we lucky? And Filip Misovski, on the other hand, we have our Simos Cloud CEO, who is a business executive with more than 20 years of experience working with SAP and Oracle, with an in-depth knowledge of business processes and HR technologies. With extensive understanding of the employee experience market, particularly in internal communication and employee recognition, Filip is leading an all-encompassing employee experience platform company, helping companies achieve their strategic and cultural goals. And with that said, now we will turn to Thomas and Filip. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure we're going to have a very bountiful and fruitful discussion. We can't hear what you have to say. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me on board.
Great introduction, and great to see you, Thomas. It's been a while.
Good to see you too, Filip. It's been a while. I remember first meeting you actually.
Yeah, so we met in Paris, right? Unleash conference. That was our last encounter.
That's probably the last time I saw you. I was thinking back to like the first time I met you.
Oh yeah, exactly. So if we go back, that before we even get into the topic, that's what I was thinking. Like we met back in 2003, I believe, when I went from Palo Alto to Germany. And my job back then was to develop self-services for managers to build better e-recruiting functionality. So basically, with few clicks, to be able to create a job requisition without really the need of HR admins or recruiters, and ultimately to be even able to post that into some job posting boards. Back then, I think it was monster.com or whatever was popular.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Right. So now if we think 20 years, and one of your LinkedIn posts, what got me thinking was that if you look at it, at least in Germany, the ratio, the hire to the time to hire since those 20 years, instead of kind of decreasing, it's increasing. Yeah. And it's amazing what has happened in technology since the moment that we created this self-service functionality for managers to create a job requisition. There was so much more innovation in the cloud. There are now candidate relation management systems. There are more automation around job postings that happened over the last 2 decades. So it's really, really interesting and kind of frightening to think that the technology hasn't really got us closer to solving some of the fundamental problems. Now that could look like, and it could appear that the technology hasn't helped us. Potentially the problem has evolved. So the same problem that we had, how we applied for jobs 20, 30 years ago is not how things are being done today. So having that context, and then kind of moving fast forward to Unleash conference, where I had a great pleasure to see your session in terms of some of the big challenges that companies will be facing, as well as opportunities for vendors like us that are playing in the HR space to tackle. It kind of caught my attention because talent shortages is like one of those topics you've been hearing for a while. It's a little bit like sustainability. It's like, we know we have a problem with the planet. We know we have a problem with our labor pool, but a lot of companies don't take it serious, like even vendors. So can you kind of elaborate, put a little bit of an overview of those challenges and the actual impact that can have on companies if they are not aware of the trends and what's happening?
So the trend is a relatively simple one, and you may remember back to in the days when you were in high school, you had those like pyramid charts of aging, right? And the chart started off looking like a pyramid, and then they eventually ended up looking like a beehive. And the problem that we face, at least in Western Europe, is that for the last 30, 40 years, there have been fewer people being born than are retiring. And, this just continues. You have birth rates of, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6. I think Italy's even lower than that, 1.1, I think. And when this stuff, drip, drip, drip over time, guess what? You look around and suddenly, there are fewer people, graduating from university or from high school to enter the workplace. And it's really, it's really as simple as that. And then at the top end of the funnel, you've also found that in many cases, people are able to retire and are then taking that opportunity and retiring. And even though in some organizations, in some countries they've extended the retirement age, from I think the UK was moved from, Germany was moving from 64 to 67, and some of the other countries, and then the disputes in France at the moment about doing this, moving the retirement age, out in France, you're in a situation where there are simply fewer people entering the workforce than are leaving it, and this is now this is exacerbated over time. So that's at a high level, and then you then break it down by by specific industry sectors, and there's some super research done by a job board called Hey Jobs. They've done a really cool analysis. They take into account the government statistics, from Germany, from the Bundesarbeitsagentur and other government data sources, and then various information sources that they've gathered, and they show by different jobs what the status is. And generically in Germany at the moment, there are more vacancies in Germany than there are active job seekers. And then when you look at certain jobs like IT, there may be like, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 job seekers, vacancies for a particular thing. And then in some places, like in some of the healthcare jobs, it's sort of 10 vacancies for one active seeker. So this really shows the extent of the problem, and it's not going to get any better unless. So it doesn't really matter what you do at a technology level. The demographics are what the demographics are. If that makes sense.
Exactly, makes a lot of sense. And ultimately, what it means for businesses is that they need to consider shutting down complete units, or not being able to grow fast enough because they cannot hire for these professional positions, whether in IT, whether in healthcare, right? So the impact is
but it's
pretty
also
immense.
in places like retail. If you may have noticed it, like restaurants, battling to find wait staff, or it's not always about. We get in this little bubble in tech that it's all about the tech jobs, but it's not just about tech jobs. It's actually, we see real shortages in other, in areas such as nursing, things like in Germany again, shortage in people, moving into professions like bakers and plumbers and what Germans call Handwerker jobs. That there's a massive shortage of people, serving those very important jobs in society too. So it's a significant high level demographic challenge, I think. It would probably be worse without the improvements in tech, but I don't think tech is tech's going to save us here.
So the impact is also even on personal life, right? You go to a restaurant, you go to your next supermarket, people are, you have only one cash line, cashier open, and not
this is
4
driving,
or 5.
Places like supermarkets, this is driving the increased automation. So you will see, as you go to more and more supermarkets, it's already happened in the UK, but there's a lot more of the self-checkout options, and you'll see that more and more in here as well. Lidl's and Aldi's and Reva's and those places will have much more automated checkout capabilities in retail, and so that will continue, so that there's demand on the one hand for automation, and I think there's increasing coherent demand for better management of immigration as well, because the businesses will need people to come to Western Europe to meet these skill shortages.
Exactly, and that leads me to the next question. I mean, if we look at the US, with the whole H-1B visa, which is the way to get tech talent through. If you look at Germany historically, you mentioned the Handwerker. Most of the Handwerker came from immigration. If you go around in a Baustelle here, where people build the new houses, you won't hear German being spoken, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's not a new trend that immigration is one of the factors that can somehow slow down the decline. Another one we talked about, elderly folks, those who really don't like, they can retire, but they like to stay active, right? For whatever reason, not always has to be monetary reason, right? So those folks who would like to, come out of the retirement, really get back to the labor market. So these are like two kind of sources. And the second one was confirmed in this global trend 25th annual HR system survey that was done, that actually in the US, most prominently, there were actually these, rehirees from retirement. Now, what do you think are the challenges from these two sources of immigration, as well as, and even keep in mind with the war now, I think the other day I heard that like officially there's 1 million of Ukrainians registered. Who knows how many unofficial are like in total in Germany. So there is human pool. The question is how much of that is really a addressable talent pool, right?
Yeah.
And
Look, I mean, I'm not
skilled and so on.
Yeah, I'm not a demographic economist, so I've got to be careful about getting out of my sort of completely out of my comfort zone here. But if we look at I think the dynamic with the retiree question is quite different between the US and at least Germany, in that we have many people. This is not everybody, but most people in Germany, when they retire, they have a financial security through the state and through employment pension provisions. So many people in Germany actually have the opportunity to retire early. And so we've seen a wave of, if you look at my former employer and your former employer, quite a lot of people, clock out at 55, and or at 58 or 60 or whatever, and go into early retirement, and they may do a bit of part-time work here and there, but in many cases, they are comfortable enough that they're no longer required to work. And the situation in the US is a little bit more complicated than that, and that there has been a hollowing out of the pension system in the US, and there are a lot of people that are under provision from a pension perspective, so they are having to work. They're having to work longer in the absence of state, of the pension system keeping up with the requirements. Now, you can argue that, and some people will argue that there is a pension time bomb in Europe, and and that the funding models that will not work going forward. I'm not enough of an economist I'm not an economist at all, but I'm not enough of an expert to make judgments on the the fundability of the German pension system. But at least in much of Central Europe, this the idea that I need to go and get a part-time job at a supermarket to pay my medical bills or to do whatever it's not really the case. And so people will tend to do perhaps hobbies or do part-time work that may be interesting for them, but the idea that I think the retirees will fill the gaps in the labor market. It's not going to fly over over here, at least in my sense. It may make a small difference in some jobs, but I think in very few jobs it will it plays. I think other dimension that I think needs to change, which I think is a much bigger opportunity and one that requires more, I think would require a more enlightened behavior from government, is the opportunities for women to return to work more easily after childbirth and so on. The societal mechanisms for supporting women returning to work, and also within companies and so on, to encourage women to return to work. I think there's a long way to go in terms of improving that. So I'd argue that that the Scandinavian countries, for instance, are far ahead of where Germany is in terms of both the societal and the governmental incentives to encourage to create those environments and the flexibility that enables women to return to work more effectively. And I think if companies were to do more, and government was to do more to address that would also be super helpful, because situation where you've got many highly trained, highly motivated women who are not able to engage in the workforce because of inadequate provision in terms of childcare or in terms of schooling models and so on, and also in terms of and there've been improvements in this in terms of the tax incentives to enable people to go back to work. Those could all be significantly improved. Yeah.
Great point. So I think the point you're making is that actually governments play a huge role, not so much even HR tech companies or different talent tools, governments, need to rethink their incentives model of retirement, right? In the case of Germany, it's very luxurious, right? That people,
I
don't
don't think
need
it's
to work.
luxurious.
Right?
I think it's, people have, remember, it's like people have contributed into these, into these systems for a long time.
Once, yeah.
And there's a social contract between, between the citizen and the state in these, as these relationship. And I don't think the German pension system is luxurious. I think it's fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right, but still, I think they were potentially designed 50, 60, 70 years ago. Like we were talking about example with the manager e-recruiting stuff designed 20 years ago. There are a lot of challenges that have changed, and also the health span, the lifespan changes. The whole R&D in discovery of new drugs to fight all these diseases. So to rethink basically the incentives model, like you're saying, in the Nordic countries for women to be much more active at work and not to be prevented due to whatever societal reasons, as well as not to take away the fair model or what I call luxurious model, but to really have also incentives to be a mentor, to still stay in their practical work that they were doing, but to mentor some of these young people, or to help them part-time, right? And to be, again, from a tax or from whatever point of view, more incentivized in order to have also.
I think there could be more done. There definitely could be more done there. But if you had to choose, do I want older people working longer, or do we want the system made more effective for women returning to work? I take, from a productivity point of view, I take the women back at work any day.
Sure. Great point. All right, now let's switch
from a fairness and a human rights perspective. It seems
true.
It seems like we have so much to do in terms of leveling that, that playing field.
Perfect. Now let's switch a little bit back to the HR technology, right?
Yeah.
We know, it cannot make a miracle. It cannot, reverse this problem of demographics, which is, given. But what are the things that do you see that there's a potential for the use of HR tech that can help companies as well as vendors, because to think about opportunities to address some of the challenges around demographics, around open vacancies, skilled shortages. And I think you're helping a lot of founders, and you're investing in this field. You're seeing a lot of trends. What do you see the top 3 or top opportunities there where HR tech can help in this solving this challenge?
Yeah, so there is I'm going to talk about skills management in a second. I think that's a super fascinating area.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that technology can do, can help us do, is it can shorten distance. And so, we've seen that with the growth of remote work, right? The models that are in place now, technology-driven models that are in place now to, enable people to, I don't know, hang out in, it's North Macedonia where you're from, right? From Macedonia, yeah.
Originally, yeah, but I'm in Frankfurt, so.
I know you're in Frankfurt now, but you might want to say, well, to hell with Frankfurt. I want to go and hang out on the,
sure.
I want to go to hang out on the beach in, Macedonia. So the opportunities to work remotely now, empowered by technology, are, it's really, fascinating to see the growth of companies like Oyster and Deal and Workmotion and so on, that have really, put in place the technology empowerment to allow, remote work to be not just a complicated exception, but something that organizations big and small can do, and that people can work from different, people in Kenya can work on a software project in Germany or in Italy or whatever, and that people can work around the world. I think technology can serve as an equalizer and a minimizer of geographical constraints, and that's, I think, really, that's a really positive opportunity that we have with with HR tech. And I think companies like Oyster, I think it's really fantastic how they've really taken what is theoretically a very simple model, but applied that on a global basis to enable this global system of record. I think that's probably one that I'd mention. Also I think the probably the other potential, and we're still early days in this, is the ability to deconstruct jobs into its component, into its component elements, and the skills that are required to deliver those component elements, and then also for people to be able to be described and defined and understood through the lens or through that fine grade lens of skills is going to be super interesting, and it will enable a much fairer and more transparent matching of people to opportunity, and that is potentially very exciting. There's a lot of work to do there, but I think that looks super exciting, and I think there's a positive role to play for some some elements of AI, for AI technology in that in that regard. So that's probably two to start with. I've talked a bit. Maybe your comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just read a stat, and shout out to Steve Goldberg, one of your analyst friends. So Deloitte basically published a research saying that they surveyed business managers or managers that said 63% of them are not aware, like their people are working on work that's going beyond the classical job description within their organization. So more than half of people are not doing the job what they were hired for, right? Which basically begs the question, how do you hire then? Do you hire based on job description, which basically gets outdated the minute the person walks in and has to work on something outside of the work or the job that was assigned? And I think that's where the whole skills dimension comes in, right? The soft skills, the human capabilities, the power capabilities, the attitudes they have, and then learning the hard skills, learning the ropes.
And I think
the different jobs and assignments.
Right? Exactly. The advances, I think, in things like micro learning and so on. Yeah, and the decomposing, if you like, of the learning process, I think is also super exciting. The idea that you can take. I mean, I seem to have spent my life studying, but I've the last couple of years I've done a few short courses, through something called Get Smarter, and I did some courses in venture capital finance through them. And it was sort of 6-week course, and an hour a day for 6 weeks, and with tutors and online stuff and assignments that you handed in and stuff. And it was like really super cool, well organized, really great teachers. I think the academics from Oxford, and it was done really, really well. And I just think that this technology empowered learning is really, really exciting. And I think we're due, and we're seeing the seeds of this re-enabling or rethinking of learning in the context of work, and that I think is also potentially very, very exciting.
Agreed. And just again to another correlation. So Josh personally, he loves to talk about the capability academies, right? And we see some of these academies that are really focused in a particular domain, a particular space, and they kind of bring in that expertise, that bring this insights packed into an agenda that's really helping enable people. In the case of Josh, obviously he's looking at the HR set of capabilities that are required. Very good, very good. So then next one, like what would be the burden issue in this domain in the case of skills and talent shortages, which you would like to have HR tech fix in the next, 3 to 5 years? I think you talked about this reimagine, or in the last thread that we're actually triggered this whole webinar is, do we need to reimagine the candidate pipeline creation, right? what are the things you beside the stuff that the two three things that we talked about just now? Anything else you believe HR tech can really fix and closer the distance or lessen the friction?
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I'm big on at the moment, and some of them are the first one I would say is that there's a fantastic opportunity to do exciting stuff with data, right? And what I'd argue is that HR systems for the last 60 years, 70 years have been predominantly process focused. Right? It's, we have this process, we need to track and manage this process, we need to calculate a payroll, we need to track your leave, we need to make sure that we track this information for the hiring process and so on. But the opportunities to drive meaningful insights out of data, we haven't really done much of that. And this is probably the area where one of the areas where I've been excited about, and when I look at the investments we've made at Acadian, one of them, I'll talk about one of them. We'll talk about a couple of those if you don't mind, but one of them is a company called Figures, out of Paris. And what Figures started by a guy called Virgil, and he was an HR manager in a fast-growing startup. And one of the things that really frustrated him was getting accurate compensation information so that he could make fair hiring offers. And so he built a product. His team built a product that does real-time compensation data. So that you can really drive complete transparency through your comp processes. So you can benchmark yourself against your industry, against jobs and stuff, but not in that sort of abstract way, once a year thing, but actually at the moment, what is a product manager, what is a senior product manager in Paris being paid, in startups being paid at the moment, and what's a fair salary for that, and then driving that transparency and that value out of data, I think is super exciting. And as we I've been called a little bit skeptical on AI, and I think I am a bit skeptical, but I'm just cautious. I think that there's tremendous opportunity for AI to do great things for us. We've been disappointed in the past. We've been disappointed by AI since 1966 when it kicked off, and so I think there's still a lot to do before we make AI safe and make AI AI should contribute to humanity. AI should not contribute to just being a cool technology. So, I'm very excited about what's going on at the moment. I'm also very concerned that organizations are not taking things like data protection and AI fairness and stuff into account. I mean, a great example of this, I'm not an investor in the company, but I wish I was. There's a company in the US called Textio who does
the bias.
The bias stuff. And she's done an analysis over the last month over, the chat GPT. And when you look at chat GPT and on the one hand, it's super exciting, but on the other hand, it has, there's serious problems with that data set. So I'm super long-term positive about AI. I'm just a little bit nervous about some of the shorter term implications are a bit concerning for me at the moment. But I think long term it's going to be very, very interesting to see how we can use those tools to make the world fairer, to make things more efficient. It's going to be super exciting. I think in areas like recruitment, and I think in areas like learning, I think we'll see some very real breakthroughs driven with real AI within the next few years. there've been promises of those in the past, but I think we're going to see, we're going to see some very exciting things just down the road.
Very good, very good. And just to recap a little bit from the earlier point you made, like the changes we've seen from the earlier systems created 34 years ago and how they were used. I mean, back then when we met 20 years ago, I don't know if you remember, one of the most famous transaction was CATS2, like doing your time recording and your tracking. And like once a month, you get an email or a conversation with your manager about, did you book your time? And like back then, people didn't ask, I mean, they asked how you feel, but there was no discussion about, your well-being or about culture or about, recognizing being public or, doing this in a more, systematic way, right? So there were different type of conversations that managers and employees and the systems that enabled them. Fast forward 20 years, there's a whole other expectation. Yes, you need to still do time recording. I mean, I was a couple of weeks ago at a partner event where you still see a lot of these large time tracking vendors that are keep growing, but there's also these startups and new companies and new tech stacks that are being created to serve this new domain of engagement or data science and data analysis to provide you with this insights. And I think that's the interesting part that I see with AI. Like, how can AI be used as a coach, as an advisor, maybe even to supplement what the manager doesn't have as a natural skill, or as a personal advisor to an employee, to suggest them the type of skills, the type of approaches to work, right? The type of communication to use, the type of learning, right? All these scenarios, rather than to replace, right, jobs, rather to really make us more human, make us more smarter, make us more empathetic at the end, right? Which maybe wasn't the case 20 years ago when, the main thing was, did you do your time recording? Anyways, so last question.
That's the hope. Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, if you, look at, this, so I don't know whether you can see that book called Noise.
Noise.
Yeah, I mean, one of the startups we're involved with is doing a lot of work in terms of applying nudge theory to once you've done the training, remind you, a week later when you go into the meeting, you've just been in a negotiation skills training, you're going to a meeting and remind you of what you actually learned in the course so that you actually use it in real life. It's super. There's so much opportunity in that space. The way I've tried to be described, my advice at the moment is to sort of deep research modest AI. Let's build these things based on good science, good fundamental science first, and then move on from there.
Agree. Very good. Last question before we get into the audience questions. Any practical advice you would want to give businesses, right, companies, to ensure their success in the coming years with these kind of challenges? So talent, skill shortage. What would be your advice, not to software vendors and the cool stuff we can be building, but companies as they're embracing the whole range of startup innovation, as well as existing players, innovation they're coming through. How should they best rationalize that? How should they best try and really use what can really have the biggest impact for their organization?
What I think they need to develop it's a theory in business theory called ambidextrous, right? So you need to be able to do two things at once. So on the one hand, you need to be having, with your existing architectures, your existing systems, your existing processes, you need to be very efficient at driving optimization out of what you do today, right? And there are software vendors in place that you have that do that are very aligned with your existing business process, with your existing things, and you need to be continually looking to get the best out of those relationships and optimize those relationships and optimize those systems, right? On the other hand, though, you also need to have a culture of experimentation, right? And so you need to be able to find, to be able to work with emerging companies and with emerging ideas and be able to, experiment and learn and test and prototype and keep both these disciplines going simultaneously. The discipline of efficiency, which you're driving into your, if you like, into all terms of your as-is processes, and this idea where you're able to experiment and to keep the paradox of experimentation and exploitation alive and manage that paradox in the organization. And there's lots of techniques and ways to do that, but I think my advice to any company, that reasonable sized company that's got an HR IT landscape, is to think about the landscape holistically and make sure that they have a mix of work with your existing incumbent vendors, and then have a culture of experimentation and understand how things can flow from a state of experimentation over time into a state of exploitation, and be able to balance and understand the nuances and the complexities of coping with those two concepts. And I think if you do that, you will innovate, because you won't be stuck with just doing what your incumbent vendors say. At the same time, you won't just be chasing the next shiny thing. And it's getting that balance between making the best use of what you have, right? And at the same time, also seeking out new ways of doing things.
Love it. Great advice. Thank you for that. And I think we're coming to the end. So Yoya, I will turn it to you if there are any questions from the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, there are some questions. I see very interesting questions there. Thank you both. This was a very engaging, very informative, very fruitful discussion. Let's move to the first question. It says here, anonymous attendee asks both of you, when talking about the skilled workers shortage, would you say work from anywhere culture is a part of solution to the problem of lack of workers in IT? Or it just deepens the problems with availability of better paying markets to the people from lower paying countries, thus making it a problem to employ in those markets?
Yeah, I'll have a go at this first. So there's two dimensions to this. One, you have, so I prefer the idea of people being able to work remotely, happily living where they are. I think there's nothing better for the economies. What would be super cool for the economies in emerging markets is if you can stay, in your, where you've grown up with your parents and with your friends, yet earn Western European salaries or close to Western European salaries working remotely. I think that's a super win for all parties. When you can do that, that's super cool. What would be even better is if in those economies themselves, they establish, more and more businesses are established. But I think the opportunities for people to work remotely without having to migrate, without having to leave country A to go work in country B, ultimately are better for country A. So I think that remote work, when done responsibly, can also have major benefits for emerging markets. But what those people do is they'll learn global skills, and then they may well decide to do a startup locally. I mean, as an example, we did an investment last week in a startup in Kenya, right? Who's a company called WorkPay, and they're building a core HR and payroll system for eventually for 40 countries across sub-Saharan Africa, and that development's been entirely done out of the local markets, but with support with international VCs and with international technology vendors like a Google or an Amazon platform underneath. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities here. We live in a world that is not fair. We live in a world where there are many inequalities, and we're not going to solve them all overnight. But I believe that when done well, the remote working can help drive a reduction in inequality.
And I just want to add a little thing. I think I agree with everything that Thomas said. But being a child of immigration, right, and Thomas as well, I think there's an incredible opportunity for people to be open to also see other parts of the world and live in those worlds. Like if I didn't have an opportunity to live in the US, Germany, Israel, I would not be the person that I'm sitting today. So I think it's not only having the comfortable card of sitting where you are and getting paid higher. Yes, fair enough, but that's not how you're going to experience the real world. So going out there and whether that's through travel or immigration or whatever it means, I think the experience cannot be replaced in a way through just the remote work. So I really encourage that people are open for immigration as well, simply because some of those experiences are not the same when you are sitting in your
yeah.
So let's maybe move to the next question.
Okay, one more. Here, Mr. Mattia is asking, from your experience, what would you say was the biggest innovation in HR tech so far that impacted workers' shortage? I believe this is for both of you.
My MSS, requisition.
Yeah, Philip's MSS project for Coca-Cola. Yeah, in 2003. Hey, I think probably the if we think through history, it's probably the one that's had the most positive impact, I would think, and sometimes I think unfairly maligned, is the job board. If we think about it, it's kind of a little bit of history for people, but if you look at the history of enterprise or business technologies, if you thought about it without thinking about it, you would think HR is always behind. But actually, it's the opposite. 1951, the first business application. Right. The first use of a computer in a business context was at Lions Tea Room in the UK was a payroll. And they built a payroll in just over 2.5 years, right? And they ran the payroll for this big, it was like a McDonald's of the day. And then they ran it for Ford in the UK. And they built that payroll in, 2.5 years, I think it was, including the programming language that didn't exist, and also including the physical computer that didn't exist. So, when people say everyone's like really speedy at building things today with low code, no code, I always look back at that first payroll as being pretty, those guys must have been awesome. But anyway, moving forward, when you look like the first commercial use of the internet in a business context was the job board, right? That was the first real successful example of using the internet, at least legally, to transact and to do meaningful work. And we forget now, but the disruption, the innovation and the disruption that the job board brought about was immense. You think about the stuff you worked on, Philip, ESS and MSS was really the first use of a browser in the enterprise, right? There was no browser applications really that did any transactions before. I mean, it was all just document management stuff, and those were the first front ends to enterprise applications were in HR. And similarly, the adoption of SaaS in the enterprise, while you could argue CRM was maybe first. You look to things like where I used to work, SuccessFactors and Taleo and these companies, they really were pioneers in software as a service. And so I'm very positive about the opportunities with tech, and I think we will see more and more. Looking forward, I think there'll be all kinds of innovations that will help with the skill shortage that we've not even thought of yet.
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there any last question or
No. I believe our time is up. So if you all agree, we can conclude here. Cool. That's great. That's great. It's been
time flew by.
Super talking with you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you both. And Philip, lovely to see you again after this time. Yeah. All right.
Lovely, lovely.
Cool.
Same here. Great talking to you, Thomas.
And thanks for having me on the show.
Lovely.
you all.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
being here. Bye, everyone.